Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating paradox hidden right in the ancient blueprints of the book of Exodus. We're going to explore the incredibly intricate connections between building a physical space, a literal sanctuary, and the act of carving out sacred time. So here's the paradox we're looking at today. Moses received these wildly intricate, super detailed instructions to build God's dwelling place, the tabernacle, right? But then he gets a very specific command to literally halt all of this holy construction on the seventh day. It completely begs the question, why on earth would you stop the holiest work imaginable just to take a day of rest? This paradox sets up a profound contrast. On one hand, you have the physical materials of the tabernacle, which is essentially a sanctuary in space. But on the other hand, you have the Sabbath, and that is the intangible, untouchable holiness of a sanctuary in time. Here's our roadmap for unraveling this mystery today. First, sanctuaries, time and space. 2, gathering the holy materials. 3, the master craftsman. 4, parallels to the creation. 5, the high priest's garments. And finally, number 6, the perpetual covenant. All right, let's jump right into section 1, sanctuaries, time and space. The relationship between building and resting. You know, the core assumption the Israelites probably had was this. Since building the tabernacle was absolutely holy work, it would just naturally override a day of rest. I mean, that makes sense, right? But as this quote perfectly highlights, the text intentionally places the Sabbath laws right side by side with the construction blueprints to make a really powerful point. The Sabbath was not to be broken, not even for this ultimate holy work. Building that sanctuary in time was just as critical as building the sanctuary in space. Moving on to section 2, gathering the holy materials, the physical building blocks of the tabernacle. So to build this physical sanctuary, God called for free will offerings, and the community definitely delivered. They brought brilliant metals, specialized animal skins to endure the harsh desert, and that prized, incredibly durable acacia wood. But, this wasn't just a drop-off bin situation. The text goes out of its way to highlight the wise-hearted women who literally spun the vibrant yarns and goat hair with their own hands. Truly, everyone with a willing heart got involved. Now, one of the most fascinating materials listed here is techelet. This wasn't just, any ordinary color. It was this intricate, brilliant violet blue dye. And surprisingly enough, it was painstakingly extracted from marine snails, specifically the banded dye murex. The process was so incredibly difficult that this dye was historically reserved only for royalty and, well, for the divine. But here's where the practical had to meet the beautiful. Notice the stark contrast in the tabernacle's coverings. On the inside, you have these delicate, vibrant linens dyed with that precious techelet. But to protect all of that from the blistering desert sun in those brutal sandstorms, a rugged, rough outer covering of spun goat hair was meticulously woven over the top. It is literally a perfect marriage of stunning beauty and rugged function. Which brings us to section 3, the master craftsman, skill, spirit, and community generosity. Obviously, raw materials, no matter how precious they are, need skilled hands to actually shape them. Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and his assistant Aholiab from the tribe of Dan were uniquely endowed for exactly this. And notice what the text says here. They were filled with the Spirit of God. But actually, scratch that. This wasn't for prophecy or preaching. It was a divine spirit of skill to craft woodwork, metals, intricate engravings, and to teach others. It really shows that fine craftsmanship and artistic design were viewed as direct gifts from God. And inspired by these master craftsmen, the people's response was just unprecedented. Everyone with a willing heart brought free will offerings. In fact, they brought so much stuff that the craftsmen actually complained they couldn't do their work. Moses literally had to issue a camp-wide proclamation to tell people to stop donating. I mean, can you imagine a fundraising campaign today that has to literally beg people to stop giving? Absolutely wild. All right, section 4, parallels to the creation, the hidden literary architecture. So here is where the architecture becomes truly cosmic. Back in Genesis, you have the 7 days of creation, culminating, of course, in the Sabbath. Now look at the book of Exodus. The instructions given to Moses are structured as exactly 7 distinct divine speeches, each introduced by the Lord said to Moses. And the climax of that 7th speech? You guessed it, a command to keep the Sabbath. It reveals this incredible idea that building the tabernacle is meant to be a micro-reflection of God building the universe.
As scholars point out, chapters 35 through 40 of Exodus deliberately invert the earlier instructions. They actually begin with the Sabbath command rather than ending with it. And this is totally by design to emphasize that cosmic connection. Basically, before you build the space, you absolutely must recognize the sacred time. The Sabbath provides the time for a special meeting between the divine and the human, just as the tabernacle provides the physical space.
That takes us to section 5, the high priest's garments. Wearing the community. The high priest wore this incredibly intricate garment called the choshen, or breastplate. It featured a matrix of 12 precious stones set in gold, and each one corresponded to one of the 12 tribes of Israel, from the ruby of Reuben all the way to the jasper of Benjamin. Think about the symbolism here. When the high priest entered the sanctuary, he wasn't going in alone. He was physically carrying the identity, the names, and the literal weight of the entire nation right over his heart. And inserted behind those brilliant stones, tucked right within the folds of the breastplate itself, was the Urim Vetumim. This was a holy parchment bearing the sacred name. It was utilized to seek divine justice and guidance for the people whenever the community faced really profound dilemmas. The texts say the stones would miraculously light up to provide answers, literally merging the physical beauty of the gems with divine revelation. How amazing is that? Finally, we arrive at section 6, the perpetual covenant, an anchor of identity. This right here finally resolves our opening paradox. You see, God gave the Sabbath as a perpetual sign of his covenant relationship. The ancient texts tell us to observe the Sabbath, which comes from a Hebrew word meaning to guard, protect, and keep. It's very much like a precious diamond engagement ring. The ring is a sign of betrothal, representing that the people are sanctified or set apart. You don't take off your engagement ring to build the house, right? Because the ring is the very foundation of the relationship that makes the house a home in the first place. This whole idea is captured just perfectly in this famous quote from Asher Ginsburg. More than the Jewish people have kept the Sabbath has kept the Jewish people. History shows us that the physical tabernacle eventually gave way to massive temples, and those physical temples eventually fell. But that sanctuary in time, the Sabbath, it could never be destroyed by an invading army. It remained an absolute anchor of identity throughout generations. So the book of Exodus doesn't just climax with a finished physical building. It climaxes with the divine presence, manifesting as a cloud, descending to completely fill the tabernacle. It is an incredibly powerful validation of their obedience in honoring both the physical space they built and the sacred time they protected. They followed the blueprint, they stopped when they were commanded to stop, and the result was the very presence of the divine dwelling among them. So, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. We live in a modern world that is just absolutely obsessed with building, producing, and constantly working. We definitely know how to gather materials and build incredible sanctuaries in space. But have we forgotten how to stop? Do we still know how to carve out a sanctuary in time? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this changes the way you look at the balance of your own time and space.